doing the producing, so thank you very much. We're going to be talking about gender in the curious incident of the dog in the night time and how gender is important. It's not something that actually we really think about, is it? Because like he has a mother, he has a father, he has a teacher, he himself is male. So we're going to start off looking at Judy and the expectations upon women as mothers. So would you like to say something about that?
Yeah, I find it quite interesting because I guess you always think of it as, because if the story follows Christopher, she left Christopher, but I guess we're not really thinking about her own kind of needs and stuff like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Especially because the play is obviously from Christopher's point of view, he wouldn't have been able to pick up on that, but you don't really know what's happened, why she ran off with Mr. Shears in that manner. So I think it's easy to kind of label her as a bad mother.
Absolutely.
But actually, is she a bad mother, or is she a bad person for kind of needing to some time for herself?
No, and this is something that's really interesting. Being a mother myself, the fact that when you become a mother, the societal idea that your needs are always secondary to your child's. So you always put your child before you and before anything that you want. Now, there are some people, I think, who would suggest that she actually leaves Ed and Christopher because she does think it's the best thing for them, doesn't she?
Yeah, because at one point she mentions how, like, how, in the letters, wasn't it, how hard she tried and stuff like that, but it wasn't kind of going over, and how I'd argue that is also her kind of being a good mother, but I guess we can't, because they're letters, we don't really know about them, but she was trying to reach out, and she was still trying to be a mother from a distance, but...
Yeah, so there is... I have this argument with the kids in my class, and there are some that take a very hard line on Judy and say, well, she could have picked up a telephone. Writing a letter is so archaic and old-fashioned nowadays, isn't it, as a method of communication?
I suppose, but I feel like for somebody like Christopher, a letter would be more beneficial than a phone call, because I guess also it must be really hard, because like a phone call is like really awkward. You don't know what to say, you don't know how the other person's going to react, whereas a letter is a good opportunity for you to have like a platform where you can communicate your message.
Yes.
And I'd like to think that she did that because she knew that would be better for Christopher.
So they're very confessional, aren't they? So on page 42, Judy says, I was not a very good mother, Christopher. Maybe if things had been different, maybe if you had been different. So in an implicit way, she's inferring that it is his fault. But I don't think she's being cruel. I think she's being
honest,
ignorant, and honest. Yeah, and then it does go on, and on page 44, this is when she's talking about, so she says, that was when I started spending lots of time with Roger, and I know you might not understand any of this, but I wanted to explain so that you know we had a lot in common, and then we realised we were in love with one another. So she does understand that Christopher might not be aware of love and falling in love and the need that she has to be with somebody else. But I think she does try. It's just that time as well, because I do think she feels lonely in her marriage.
Yeah, and I think the whole kind of, if you were different, they wouldn't be planning for Christopher to come along and Christopher to be how Christopher is. So that must be so straining, especially if the relationship wasn't perfect. And then I guess it's kind of like the grass is always greener. Roger isn't complicated, and it's kind of that must have been so appealing to her. And actually I imagine Roger put her first, whereas Judy probably wasn't used to that. So
no, but do you think that that's having a child like Christopher, or just having a child in general, that you're not the centre of a family anymore, are you? Your children are.
I guess there's that kind of angle, and maybe she could have thought through that more, but I do feel like I guess it must have been so unrewarding with Christopher, because he's very needy, and it's like it must be very hard to communicate, whereas I guess I don't know, that's a really hard one. She's
a romantic, isn't she, Judy? In the first instance, I think that she's a romantic, and I think she has these ideas of a life that didn't turn out as it was.
The French.
Jean, like smoking some Gaulois and being all French and cosmopolitan and blah, blah, blah. But what I think is her reality is so different from her ideas. But you know how sometimes you create a narrative about your life so you can cope with your life? I think that she just couldn't do it with Christopher because he was so different.
Yeah. Do you think it was irresponsible then having a family if she kind of was going into the marriage with these kind of romantic ideals? Because like you said, having a kind of family, that suddenly changes everything. So really it could have been if you weren't ready, should there be a responsibility to not?
I don't know, because she does say if you had been different. So I think when she's saying that, she's actually saying if you had been conventional and if you had been normal,
and
my
fit
life.
into my ideal life.
Yeah. So maybe she's actually really rigid in her thinking, like Christopher. Could you argue that?
I suppose, but then again, could you argue that nothing's ever going to be perfect for her? Is she just always going to be unsatisfied? Because like Roger was perfect, but then when Christopher came, she prioritised Christopher, and then Roger was a drunk, and some stuff like that, and then she moves back. Is it one of those things where she's kind of reaching too much?
Or, but then she does stick around, and she lives in that horrible place in the bedsit, doesn't she, with Christopher? So maybe that's her second chance, and she wants to redeem herself.
But that's quite a sad ending, isn't it?
Yeah,
Where
I mean, I think it's sad.
I think it is, but because that's like the opposite of Jean and Swindon,
and she's like, in a bed sit, and your like teenage son keeps wetting himself.
Yeah.
I think, this play is so hard in terms of the endings for all the characters, because you think it's a resolution and it's not. You just know that she will always be a mother to Christopher in a way that most conventional mothers are not, because their children grow up and become more independent, and the bonds lessen. But do you think in a way that she's kind of got her comeuppance?
I don't think so, because I think she's been dealt a really bad hand. I think it's too kind of like what she did wasn't great.
Yeah.
But then nobody has been great throughout this. I don't think.
Yeah.
I think she has a better deal than Ed.
Do you?
No, a worse deal, sorry, than Ed, and I think that's unfair.
Yes.
If anything, I feel like maybe Ed. I don't know if it's probably quite a horrible thing to say, but Ed maybe could have given the house, or maybe set up some sort of thing that like they could live, even if it was separate bedrooms.
Yeah.
And that would have made Christopher happy, and Christopher wouldn't have known that neither of them are happy. But
yes, true. Because when you have a child like Christopher, you can actually they pick up on so little in terms of emotions and the social interactions, that maybe as long as he was happy and he had his computer and the dog, maybe that they would have been happy.
And then he would have felt
the lights.
And then he would have probably felt safer with his mum in the house as well.
Yeah.
And although it's still not ideal, I feel like it could have been more ideal. And then you kind of question how that didn't come up.
Yeah.
So maybe Ed's bad.
Because do remember, like we said in the one that I did with you and Miss Morris, actually, the only characterisation you get from Judy and Ed is what Christopher thinks is important. So they would have bound to have had like zillions of conversations about moving back, and obviously it's come out between them that he won't move out the house. So you have to kind of infer so much, don't you?
Yeah. Do you think he should have moved out? If you could rewrite the play to kind of try to give it a happy ending.
If I was going to rewrite the play and give it a happy ending, I would have Christopher move back in with him.
With Ed, but not Judy.
No.
Okay.
And I think actually that might have worked better. But I think I think it doesn't end with a resolution. You're on a pathway, so I think that actually. But so now this is interesting, because last time we did one of these speeches, you made a comment about Ed. So we'll look at Ed now. So as a mother, Judy is, I think, judged quite harshly by the audience, certainly by Mrs. Shears when she goes back, and Mrs. Alexander, and they're like, oh, this is what your mum actually left. The students judge her very harshly because they, I think, are still having that idea about mothers are typically the ones that stay. Ed, you said that Ed has a very physical job. He's a plumber, isn't he?
Yeah, and it's quite early mornings, and it's because my dad's a plasterer, and because sometimes you just get really bad days. It's quite physically exhausting, so sometimes it can be very draining like that. So to then have to deal with the emotional side. Now we're quite lucky because like I love my dad, but I doubt he's going to watch it.
Well, he should.
Yeah. Sometimes he could be quite short.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
stuff like that. And then I think it'll take him a time, and then once he had like a cup of tea in the shower, it's like actually.
Yeah.
Whereas with someone like Christopher, I imagine you wouldn't ever get that kind of break.
But do you think the problem therefore is the marriage in the first place? So you've got a very working class man who has a job that is very physically demanding, marrying a woman who doesn't seem to be happy playing the role of a wife and mother.
I guess that would be the issue then, and then you have to question why they got. Because I guess there's not too much of an origin story.
No,
you don't know
not at all.
whether they were kind of together for the Christopher aspect or maybe that, but I don't know. I guess Judy, it seems like she can become obsessed with an idea.
Yeah.
And then move on. Maybe at one point her idea was, a wholesome life kind of thing,
but romantic. And actually, if the marrying someone like Ed, he does strike me as being very simplistic.
Yeah.
He's obviously not educated because of the way that he speaks to Mrs. Gascoigne, swearing at teachers, the way he can't articulate himself to Christopher.
No, and then when his friends around as well, like I guess that's because obviously there's only a small segment, but he speaks in a very similar manner, so you associate that this is kind of Ed's circle as well, so it's very different to the expectations that Judy had for him and then maybe Christopher has as a father.
Yeah, and also having my own children, there tends to be like, this is so gender stereotypical, but it's the mother who tends to have the holistic understanding of the family, whereas the father is much more, well, it's tea time, I'll cook tea. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, from my experience as, having parents, I think that's very much the case.
Yeah.
Like my mum used to work in a bakery because it was down the road. It was in very early morning, so that she'd be back when we're back for school.
Yeah.
My mum, now that we've moved out of the house, is teaching at school. She's got a master's.
Oh, yeah.
She does amazing pottery and stuff. I might even put some on now.
Yeah.
Just to show,
Ooh!
But yeah, and she's like so talented and stuff like that, but she very much put all of that back.
Yeah.
And made sure that we were provided everything. That's why I'm like really thankful, especially from like a bit of a working class family. They managed to send me to university. I managed to they support me financially when I was doing my teaching training.
But imagine if your mother hadn't been there.
Exactly.
What that would have done to your life chances. I'm not saying that it's always the mother who's pushing the children further, but the balance of the mother and the father.
I definitely think I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my mum. She's kind of like my role model in terms of how I'd mimic my behaviour and stuff like that. She'd always say stuff like, you can choose your role models as well, and she'd always try to mimic the good behaviour. I get on really well with my dad, but I do think if I didn't have my mum kind of pushing me, I would probably I'd probably have fun, but I'd probably just be, plastering, laying bricks, and when I've done that with my dad, I have had fun, promise Dad. But, I do think that... Not
that kind of, the academic...
And having that healthy relationship and having support from both, I think it's definitely brought me there. So that's why you feel bad for Christopher, because he's got all the cards stacked against him.
Another thing is, on page 40, this is where they're talking about it, and Christopher's actually telling him this really interesting story about Joseph eating one of the little blocks of poo, a blue disinfectant which handed outside the toilets, and he once ate £50 from his mother's wallet. So this is something, again, that we touched on last time. You wouldn't expect your teenage child to be telling you those kind of stories that you hear if you have very young children, which is what I have. What did you do at school today? Well, Elijah said, boop, 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 and Miss said no, and Elijah went, and I'm actually sat there going. So, but Ed's obviously having to put up with that from Christopher, but then he says, Christopher, I've got to go out. Why? I've just had a call. There's a lady. Her cellar has flooded. I've got to go out and fix it. So as a single parent, there's no one to rely on. So he does ask on page 41, Christopher, if I go out, will you be okay? Actually, he doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Does he? And what's really, I think, quite interesting is, in our society with the breakdown of the kind of the conventional marriage, I think because this marriage is broken down, you realise how important it should be to have both a mother and a father.
Definitely, especially, I just picked up on this one, so like, he bangs his chin and screams a lot. I know how he feels. And I guess that obviously that would have gone straight over Christopher's head, but it's like one of those ones that it must be like, poor man. And the fact that he's then having to go off and work, it must just be non-stop. It's
he bangs his chin and screams a lot. I know how he feels, Christopher. Absolutely. And I think that little bit of humour is obviously directed at the audience who have children, and having a child, it is relentless, absolutely relentless. And I'm lucky I've got 2 children and not my husband at home, and so there's a burden that is shared. But even so, the pressure is so much, and I think the only way that Ed probably copes, I don't think he looks into things as deeply as Judy does.
No.
He takes Christopher for what Christopher is, whereas Judy is the one who says if things had been different. So Judy has this abstract thought about a life she should have had, whereas Ed is like, this is what we've got, let's just deal with it.
Could you link back to then maybe, because at the end, Christopher is like, I could do anything, can't I?
Yeah.
Do you think that's maybe his mother's influence?
What, coming back?
Yeah, so like the fact that he's now living with his mother, maybe that's why he's like, and I wrote a book, I know, I read it, we turned it into play. Yes, do you think that means I could do anything? Do you think that's because it's like suddenly he's got a mother in his life who's like, Christopher, you could do anything you want, you can have your own John.
That's really interesting, because she's the one who doesn't want to go back to Swindon. She's the one that doesn't want to go back to Swindon to do his A-level, whereas Ed's the one who does. So in certain ways, I think he's the one that actually pushes. Maybe Ed pushes him because he doesn't want him to be like him.
Oh, that'd be quite a nice thought. And he's like trying to give Christopher the opportunity.
Yeah.
He does acknowledge throughout, doesn't he, how talented he is, like especially when he's having that conversation. It's like, we don't do kind of GCSEs here or A-levels. It's like, well, why not?
Yeah.
And that's a really nice thought. I think I do like Ed.
I like Ed a lot.
He's quite violent though.
Yes.
I guess that would be playing into the gender stereotype of kind of masculinity and aggression. Also,
he's got a very physically aggressive child, and I'm not saying that Christopher. Yeah. So Christopher's not like a fighter or a scrapper, but he does react in violence.
He's the first one, isn't he, on the very first page? But he hits the police officer.
He hits the policeman. Policeman 1 tries to lift him up by his arm. Christopher screams. He hits policeman 1.
So I guess I think Ed's behaviour is more reacting then, and he doesn't have. Because I feel like Ed probably struggles with the emotional side as well.
Oh yeah, well
definitely. I mean, he killed a dog.
He killed the dog because, but remember, he killed the dog because Mrs. Shears didn't reciprocate his feelings. So I think Ed knows the importance of having a woman in his life. I know, tears.
But then in his minimal kind of existence, the furthest he could go to get a woman would be a neighbour, because he can't leave Christopher.
Exactly, that's a good point. Yeah, so his life is so narrow and so almost insular, because he's got this 15-year-old boy, and most conventional families, by the time their children gets to 15, the child probably doesn't want to spend any time with the parents and is out with their friends or having other interests, whereas Christopher's needs are such that Ed has to parent him in the way that you would actually parent a younger child.
Yeah. Because it is tantrums, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
But he kind of can't control his emotions, and the outbursts are...
Yeah. The meltdowns. And this is what Judy says, isn't it? When he broke the mixers in the shop and she couldn't cope with it. So you can't even go out and enjoy a conventional life with your children. And I think that's something, maybe Ed... because Ed, when he actually talks about it, and he talks about Mrs. Shears, he does say, maybe I was stupid. So on page 47, she said, I thought she might carry on coming over. I thought, and maybe I was being stupid, I thought she might eventually want to move in here. Now, the way that he says that is very stilted, and there's a lot of ellipsis, which I suggest shows that he's trying to confess something. Linking back to the idea, Judy's confession, although it's in letter form, is so flowing.
Yeah.
She's obviously much more expressive with her emotions, whereas Ed's is much more stilted.
Which is very typical, though, I'd argue.
A male way of, expressing emotions, and he's expressing to Christopher his deepest thoughts and wants, which is to have another family.
Well, I was doing something about this with my year 10s, and we were talking about, do you think, it's the kind of the poem you gave me, and it was like, do you think women are better at communicating because they're more open with their kind of feelings? And it led to quite interesting ones where it's like sometimes guys don't feel like they can communicate emotionally. So when suddenly you do have a chance to
Yeah.
be emotional, it's like, oh my god, how do I do this?
Yeah.
It's not logical.
Yeah.
It's almost like men are being forced to be a lot more logical.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why as soon as he has a chance and he's panicking, it's like
Yeah.
stage fright almost.
When your mum left, Eileen, Mrs. Shears, you know, and it is a confession in the same way. And then he goes on to say, anyway, we had this row, and after this particularly nasty little blowout, she chucked me out of the house. So it's obviously there were tempers frayed, but what is interesting is I think he was probably getting quite defensive about Christopher.
Yeah.
And
because the love's there.
yes, yeah, definitely. She said some things I'm not going to say to you because they're not nice. I think she was probably talking about Christopher.
Yeah.
She was like, why would I want to come and live with you and that stupid son of yours?
Yeah, especially because I imagine it's quite raw for her that,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
Roger's, you know, her.
Run off with your ex-wife. Why would I, you know.
Why would I want to be tangled into this mess further?
Yeah. Or why would I want to go and live with that child who's obviously nuts?
Yeah.
Because, you know, Ed is trying to protect Christopher. Right, anything more about Ed? And then we'll just quickly move on to Siobhan. We'll look at Siobhan. So Siobhan, as a woman, obviously as a woman. So first of all, that's quite socially conventional to have a woman in a role as more so of a Senko role, so a special needs teacher, or teachers of, you know, in special schools as they would have been called. The percentage of women in those roles is higher than male.
Well, my mum works at Ralford, the main kind of Wiltshire school for children with severe social emotional needs and stuff like that, and it's mainly female workers, so that I think is fair.
But also I think that he made Siobhan in the book, so way back in the novel, a woman because she is very much a replacement for Christopher. And if we're talking about specific gender stereotypes, if you think about the characteristics that Siobhan has, she's very nurturing. She is able to talk about emotions, but in a way that Christopher understands, which is simplistically and in a way that allows him to be able to explore his emotions.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those ones where because of the training though, whereas I guess Christopher kind of misunderstands those signs, but it's like she's a trained professional as you know, she just gets me. Be my mum.
Yeah. Well, this is what I keep saying, and when my students are very angry at Judy and they say she's a really bad mum and she should be more like Siobhan, I'm just like, first of all, Siobhan doesn't live with Christopher. Secondly, Siobhan has no disappointment in Christopher being as he is because she just deals with him. It's like the door opens and you get a class.
Yeah.
So the door opens and she gets Christopher and she uses her training to be able to deal with him. Whereas when you have a child, you do have a preconceived idea, no matter how naive this could be, of how that child is going to be and what your life will become. And if you have a disabled child, and from personal experience I can talk about this, then you have to grieve a life that you will no longer, that you won't have because your child is different to what you thought you would get.
Yeah. And I guess with teaching as well, from my experience, sometimes you might kind of talk about it, but you can just, when they leave, exactly, it's almost like the door opens, the door shuts. That's it.
Yeah.
You're done. You don't have to think about it, and it's quite nice. And whereas, there's just, I do feel bad for Siobhan though, because I guess in some ways because she probably deals with this a lot, but sometimes when Christopher is kind of treating her like a mum, it's a bit like, you know, like that. Do you think that would play on her emotions, or do you think she's just too professional?
That's a good question, actually, because some of the BBC, the bite-sized things on YouTube, there is one, and I think it's Neve Cusack who was playing her, says that there is love from Siobhan towards Christopher, but I don't actually see that. Maybe because I'm a teacher.
No,
I don't see that. And again, so this is, you know, you can talk about this in your exams, but there's lots of different viewpoints about this. But she's obviously an actress, so she is looking at this relationship as a professional, as an educational professional, a teacher. I think that there is a lot of distance between Christopher and Siobhan, and I just think she's got him absolutely right.
I think so until the end though, and that's where the kind of bits of doubt is, because she just is leaving Christopher to keep asking questions, and whereas quite often there'll be a lot of bits where she'd always have a response, whether it's the kind of, it's obviously very simple each time, where it's like, if your father told you not to do this, Christopher, you shouldn't do it, and there's always kind of this wisdom of advice each time, whereas at the end she just kind of leaves him hanging.
But don't you think that that's part of her training kicking in?
Do you think?
Yeah, we've had this conversation
Maybe,
before on
yeah.
one of these, and the fact that I actually think that she's doing that because she's not leading him on. So on
Yeah.
page 99, does that mean I can do anything, Siobhan? Does that mean I can do anything? The two look at each other for a while, lights black. What
The
do you
fact that they
think?
look at each other though, I don't know, I just feel like maybe, because obviously, yeah, you're not meant to leave them on, but that must be so horrible to think that, like, after this massive journey they've been on together,
Yeah.
but at the very end it's like, well, best case, you know, you can't really do anything. It must be quite a frustrating job in that respect.
But don't you think it's the opposite of frustrating? It's realistic.
It's realistic, but yeah.
I think something, and this is from my own experience, that sometimes parents of disabled children or parents of non-typical children can work so hard to get their child to a level that they think is equitable and equal with other people. But life isn't like that. So when you have a young child, you can work so hard to get them to the same level as their peers who are maybe able-bodied or who are, you know, neurotypical. Whereas when all of that sort of help, support is taken away, these children are left to fend for themselves because of the cuts and austerity. Actually, what she is doing is she's introducing him to the realities of life.
I suppose, and I guess there's only so much you can do, especially as a teacher, and
Yeah.
he's going to move on. Yeah, no, I think I agree there then.
But I mean, this again only comes
Yeah.
from experience of being a teacher and having disability in the family. I think if you were to look at it in a different way, you'd think that it's a very positive ending because he's done all of this and look at what he could do.
I guess it all depends on the stage directions, but I guess the two look at each other for a while. I guess it would even just depend on their kind of presence on the stage, because like she could be looking like, you know, oh God, how am I going to say this? But it could be like a supportive look, like maybe.
Or it could be like this.
Yeah.
Or it could be like, oh, Chris.
And I guess with that maths bit when it's just chaotic.
Yeah.
But I think Siobhan is a good character. Do you think it's important that she is female then? Do you think?
Yeah, I do.
So you don't think that, because at no point does it really reference, you know, motherly stuff, or do you think it's just we're reliant on those stereotypes to kind of understand the character better?
Yeah, I do. And I think that she has that maternal... she's not... What I think is important is she's female. She's not laddie with him. She's not kind of... not that Christopher could do it, but you know, like some male teachers can be quite bantery with their... All right, da-da-da. And I think...
Guilty of that, to be fair.
Oh, Mr Lavington, all I
Yeah.
hear is bants next door. And I think it's important that she actually has that maternal... caring nature, because I think that draws out and it means that there is this contrast between Judy and Siobhan, and I think that that's really important. She has replaced him as a female.
So to be able to get the comparison between those two characters.
Yeah. Maybe to highlight Judy's failings as well.
Nice. I guess also you could kind of put some similarities between her and Ed, because I do think Ed, in a weird way, is kind of got the stereotypical maternal aspect. So I guess, and you can compare some of them with the fact that they get most of the kind of talk conversations and stuff like that are between Christopher and Ed, so you can kind of get those comparisons.
Yeah.
And I think Ed does quite well without the training, so
I
maybe
think
you
he
could
does.
compare Siobhan to Ed.
Yes. I think that they both speak to Christopher in a way that is far less emotional than Judy. And also what I think about it is if they're using Ed and Judy as being stereotypically male and female, Siobhan has a mixture of both of them, which could be Stevens exploring the importance of trained professionals in the lives of these children and students like Christopher, and when that goes, what are you left with?
And if Siobhan does exhibit both of those, could it also be highlighting the importance of the kind of having the mother and father, and what we talked about earlier with the kind of keeping the family together?
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Yeah. Anything else? You got anything else to say?
No, I think I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, again, it's linking very much, which we have done before, the idea of family. So you have a male and a female that have maybe slightly more stereotypical male and female. I mean, you know, a normal family is slightly more nuanced, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas you've got romantic Judy and working class Ed. And I think Siobhan is put in as sort of...
mediator.
Yeah, a mediator, a professional in, you know, in the absence of Judy, she's mothering. But what I'm saying is, and this goes back to what we said at the start, the judgment that we have on Judy is much harsher because she's a woman.
Which is unfair.
Yeah,
I think at least anyway.
absolutely unfair. But there you go, that's life, isn't it?
So who's your favourite out of Ed and Judy?
Ed.
Why though? If you just said that the Judy bit's unfair, that's...
Why is that? Because I just think he deals very well with Christopher. I think he's the one that stayed. I think... I just think it's unfair how things have turned out for him when he did what he did, and he was the best. And it's not saying I don't feel sympathetic for Judy, because I do, but I just think as a person she was not the sort of person that I would like to spend time with. I just think she's too flighty and a little anxious, and you know, I don't know, I just don't particularly like her. And I just like Ed. I think he'd be a nice, kind guy, trying to do his best, and that's what you want.
Yeah, I think I agree. Perfect.
All right then, so thank you very much, Mr Lavington, who's now going to go and sort all this out, and I can't wait to see your mum's pottery stuff.
Oh yeah.
Could she make me a cup? I am Miss Sonnet, and I hope you enjoyed this, and see you later. Bye bye.